Es un principio general.
According to a general principle of property law, in the deposit of a fungible good, an irregular deposit, the safekeeping obligation requires that 100% of the tantundum be kept at the disposal of the depositor at all times. There will be plenty to say about this, but if the state has a function, it is precisely to safeguard property rights, to properly define them, with all of their implications, and to properly defend them. Therefore, in theory, if there are public authorities who seek the common good, then their primary duty in the sphere of money should be precisely to safeguard property rights. That is, with respect to demand or sight deposits and their equivalents, to watch bankers and make sure they maintain a 100% reserve ratio at all times. However, in the different examples we are going to analyze, we will see that throughout history, public authorities and governments, far from trying to correctly define and effectively defend property rights in this area, have ended up becoming accomplices and have even encouraged bankers' wrongdoing. I have just said that ultimately the exercise of fractional reserve banking permits the generation of means of payment. It involves the power to issue money, which is extremely significant. Notice, Anastasia, where are my 10,000 euros? Don't appropriate them, they belong to Anastasia. Notice, I have just won 10,000 euros. They are just coming into circulation, and I am going to receive them. Who could do that? It is an enormous power, and as you know, the authorities are spendthrifts. Basically, what do they want? And what have they always wanted throughout history? To finance their whims, to finance their palaces, to purchase support, to finance their military projects, their wars. That is what the authorities have always wanted. And the problem the authorities face is that of financing. They must finance their projects with taxes, and citizens resent those taxes and are unwilling to pay them, and discontent arises, and the authorities are discredited, etc. But if the authorities, acting in collusion with bankers, find a way to appropriate depositors' money from nothing, then many of their financial problems disappear. So we must not be surprised by what we are about to see, that the authorities have become the main accomplices of private bankers, and vice versa. Indeed, the authorities have even granted these economic agents called bankers the exclusive privilege of acting outside general legal principles, that is, of operating with a fractional reserve in the sphere of the monetary demand deposit and its equivalents. For centuries, the authorities searched for the much sought-after philosopher's stone. The philosopher's stone was a stone that would turn a rock into gold if rubbed against it. Gold was money par excellence, and so in this way, the authorities thought they could acquire the unlimited liquidity they needed to finance their wild projects without any restrictions. And in the end, though it seems incredible, they ended up finding their longed-for philosopher's stone specifically in the banking business, and the granting of the privilege to banks of operating with a fractional reserve ratio. It was only late in history that thinkers and philosophers began to understand all of these phenomena we are going to consider throughout history. We will see that the first to make out what was happening were the great thinkers who emerged during the Spanish Golden Age, around the University of Salamanca, the scholastics of our Golden Age. One of them, Luis Saravia de la Calle, in his book Instrucción de Mercaderes, identifies the cause of the harmful effects of banking in the fact that man's insatiable greed has so thoroughly banished his fear of God and sense of shame, and I even believe it is due to the neglect of the Republic's spiritual and temporal leaders. Note that he mentions the greed of bankers, but only the neglect of rulers. Always more lenient there. It is frightening to attack the authorities. He merely describes them as negligent in defending what they must defend. I think this is a more than kind interpretation. In reality, a perfectly self-interested collusion exists. Well, to illustrate this process, we will first go back to the classical Greek and Roman world. Then, following a vacuum of 1,000 years of economic standstill throughout the Middle Ages, The process started up again at the end of the late Middle Ages in the commercial cities of the Mediterranean, and at the beginning of the Renaissance, which is the second historical example we will offer. And third, we will examine how the same process repeated with the emergence of the first government banks beginning in the 17th century. Again, notice the obvious parallels between the processes in the first three historical cases we will analyze.